the world didn't end with a bang like everyone thought it would. Nah, it went out with a whimper, a cough, and then a whole lot of screaming. Marcus Webb stood on the rooftop of Henderson's hardware store, watching the sun dip below what used to be downtown Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded him way too much of the fires that had torn through the city 3 weeks ago. The smell still hung in the air, thick and nasty, mixing with something worse, something that made his stomach turn even after all this time. Down below, they were moving, shuffling through the streets like some messed-up parade that nobody wanted to see. The dead ones. The biters. The zombies. Whatever you wanted to call them, they were everywhere, and they weren't going away anytime soon. Marcus gripped his baseball bat tighter, the wood worn smooth from constant use. It wasn't much, but it had kept him breathing for 22 days, and that was more than most folks could say. His partner, Jake Rodriguez, was supposed to be on watch, but Marcus couldn't sleep. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant remembering what the world looked like before everything went straight to hell. Before his kid sister turned into one of those things. Before his mom stopped answering her phone. Before the military rolled through, promising safety and salvation, then disappeared like smoke when things got real ugly real fast. "Yo, you're supposed to be getting some shut-eye, man," Jake's voice cut through the darkness, rough and tired. The dude looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks, his usually clean-shaven face now covered in patchy stubble, his eyes sunken and constantly moving, always watching. That's what this world did to you. It took young guys in their 20s and turned them into paranoid old men who jumped at every shadow. "Can't sleep worth a damn," Marcus muttered, not turning around. "They're getting thicker down there. More than yesterday." Jake moved up beside him, and Marcus could feel the tension radiating off his friend like heat from asphalt in summer. "Yeah, I noticed. Been counting them for the past hour. Rough estimate, I'd say we got about 200 of those ugly mothers in a 3-block radius. That's double from last week." "They're moving towards something," Marcus said, tracking the general flow of the shuffling crowd below. "Question is what? Or who?" Jake added grimly. "Riley said she heard broadcasts on the radio earlier. Some group claiming they got a safe zone set up near the old Navy pier. Says they got walls, supplies, the whole 9 yards." Marcus finally turned to look at his friend, raising an eyebrow. "And you believe that garbage? Man, we fell for that line before. Remember the school? The one that was supposed to be fortified?" Jake's jaw tightened. They both remembered. They'd lost Tommychin there, good kid, only 19. Got bit trying to help some people who turned out to be using survivors as bait to draw the dead away from their own hideout. That had been the day Marcus stopped trusting broadcast messages and started trusting only what he could see with his own 2 eyes. I know, Jake held up his hands defensively. "But Riley's smart. She wouldn't bring it up if she didn't think it was worth checking out. We're running low on food, Marcus. Real low. We got maybe 4 days left, 5 if we stretch it." Marcus knew Jake was right, but that didn't make the decision any easier. The hardware store had been good to them. Secure. Quiet. But it was also a dead end, literally. No food sources nearby, no water except what they'd stored, and winter was coming. Chicago winters were brutal in the best times, and these were definitely not the best times. "Where's Riley now?" Marcus asked. "Downstairs with the others. Beth's leg is getting worse. The infection's spreading despite the antibiotics we scavenged." Marcus cursed under his breath. Beth Morrison had been with them since day one, a tough-as-nails nurse from Cook County Hospital who'd saved more than one of their lives with her medical knowledge. She'd caught her leg on some rusty metal while they were running from a horde last week, and despite cleaning it out, the wound had gone bad. Without proper antibiotics, without a real hospital, she was living on borrowed time. "We need to move then," Marcus said, the decision settling in his gut like a stone. But we do it smart. No rushing in blind. We scout it first, make sure it's legit. Jake nodded, relief evident on his face. I'll tell the others. We move at first light? Nah, too dangerous. The biters are more active in the morning for some reason. We move at noon, when the sun's high. They seem slower in direct sunlight. As Jake headed back downstairs, Marcus took one last look at the dead city below. Somewhere out there, his sister was walking around, not alive but not quite gone either. He'd made himself a promise that if he ever saw her again, he'd put her down proper, give her the peace she deserved. But 3 weeks in this new world had taught him that promises were just another luxury nobody could afford anymore. The group gathered in what used to be the hardware store's break room, a cramped space with a table, some chairs, and walls covered in faded posters about workplace safety that seemed darkly ironic now. Besides Marcus, Jake, and Riley, there was Beth, currently propped up on a makeshift cot, her face pale and sweaty. Darius Johnson, a big guy who used to work construction, sat cleaning a crowbar that had seen way too much action. Kevin Martinez, quiet and jumpy, barely 18, kept his eyes on the floor. And then there was Grace Patterson, a middle-aged woman who'd been a high school teacher and now served as the group's voice of reason when everyone else wanted to do something stupid. All right, listen up, Marcus started, keeping his voice low even though they were on the second floor and had the stairwell barricaded. You learned quick that noise was the enemy. We're moving out tomorrow. Noon sharp. Riley, tell them what you heard. Riley stepped forward, a slim woman in her early 30s with her dark hair pulled back tight. She'd been an IT specialist before the world ended, and she was the only one among them who knew how to work the complicated radio equipment they'd salvaged. I've been monitoring all frequencies for the past week. Most of it's dead air or automated distress signals running on loop. But 3 days ago, I picked up a live broadcast. Human, definitely human. They claim to have established a secure zone at Navy Pier. They're calling it Haven. Haven, Darius snorted. That's real creative. Creative or not, they gave specific details, Riley continued, shooting Darius a look. They've got the pier blocked off, only one access point in or out, which they've fortified. They claim to have over 100 survivors, food stores, water purification, and medical facilities. They broadcast coordinates and a specific call signal for anyone who wants to come in. Sounds too good to be true, Grace said, her arms crossed. Which usually means it is. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But we're out of options here. Beth needs real medicine, we're almost out of food, and winter's coming. We stay here, we die slow. At least this gives us a chance. Beth stirred on the cot, her voice weak but determined. Don't make decisions based on me. I'm deadweight right now, and we all know it. Shut that talk down right now, Marcus said firmly. You patched up Darius when that biter nearly took his arm off. You saved Kevin when he had that fever. We're not leaving anyone behind, and we're not writing anyone off. We move together, or we don't move at all. The group fell silent for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Finally, Grace spoke up. What's the route? Navy Pier is at least 6 miles from here through downtown. That's a lot of distance to cover on foot with the dead walking around everywhere. Jake unfolded a worn city map on the table, marked with their notes and observations over the past weeks. We take the side streets, avoid the main roads. The biters tend to cluster on the big avenues. We know from experience they're drawn to noise and movement, so we stay quiet, stay quick. We use the alleys, move through buildings where we can. 6 miles normally would take maybe 2 hours on foot. With obstacles and detours, we're looking at maybe 6 to 8 hours. That's if everything goes smooth, Darius added. Which it never does. That's why we prep tonight and move smart tomorrow, Marcus said. Everyone packs light. Essentials only. Weapons, water, food for 2 days, first aid. Nothing else. Darius, you take point. You've got the muscle and the reach with that crowbar. Jake and I will take middle guard. Riley, you help Beth. Grace and Kevin, you're on rear watch. Kevin finally looked up, fear evident in his young eyes. What if we run into a horde? What if there's too many? Marcus met the kid's gaze steadily. Then we run. We hide. We do whatever it takes to survive. Same as always. But we stick together. Nobody goes off alone. Nobody plays hero. We've made it this far by being smart, not brave. The night passed slowly, each person lost in their own thoughts, checking and rechecking their supplies, their weapons. Marcus found himself sitting next to Beth's cot around 3 in the morning, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. You think it's real? Beth asked quietly, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. This Haven place? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I think people need hope. Whether it's real or not almost doesn't matter. We can't stay here. So we either sit and wait to die, or we move towards something that might be better. Even if it turns out to be nothing, at least we tried. Beth managed a weak smile. When did you get so philosophical? When the dead started walking around, I guess. Makes you think about things differently. I'm sorry I'm slowing you down. Beth, I swear, if you apologize one more time, I'm gonna let Darius carry you over his shoulder just to embarrass you. Marcus grinned, and Beth actually laughed, a sound that seemed foreign in this new world. You're a good leader, Marcus. Better than you give yourself credit for. I'm just trying to keep people alive. That's what makes you good at it. Noon came faster than anyone wanted. The group assembled in the hardware store's back alley, a narrow space between buildings that stunk of garbage and worse things nobody wanted to think about. The sun was high and bright, unusually warm for late October, and Marcus took that as a good sign even though he knew better than to believe in signs anymore. They moved out in formation, Darius up front, his crowbar ready. Marcus and Jake followed, Marcus with his bat and Jake carrying a pipe wrench that could cave in a skull with one good swing. Riley supported Beth, who was trying her best to walk despite the obvious pain. Grace and Kevin brought up the rear, Grace with a hammer and Kevin clutching a knife like his life depended on it, which it probably did. The first 2 blocks went smooth, too smooth. The alleys were clear, the buildings silent. They could hear the biters on the main streets, that awful shuffling sound mixed with random moans and the occasional shriek that still made Marcus's skin crawl, but they didn't see any up close. This is wrong, Jake muttered. It shouldn't be this easy. Don't jinx it, Marcus whispered back, but he felt it too. That prickling on the back of his neck that said something was off. They were crossing through an abandoned restaurant, moving through the kitchen toward the back exit, when they heard it. Voices. Human voices. Marcus held up a fist, and everyone froze. Darius slowly lowered himself into a crouch, and the others followed suit. You sure she said they'd come this way? A male voice asked, rough and unfriendly. That's what the radio chick said. Group of 7, leaving from the hardware store on 5th. This is the smart route, ain't it? Another voice responded. Marcus's blood ran cold. They'd been monitoring the radio. They knew about Riley's broadcasts. His hand tightened on his bat as he caught Jake's eye. His friend's expression mirrored his own thoughts. This was a setup. How much longer we gotta wait? I'm tired of babysitting this trap. As long as it takes. Boss wants anyone who can make it this far. Says they're strong, useful. And if they're not useful, well, the biters gotta eat too. Marcus made a quick decision. He signaled to move back, slow and silent. The group began to retreat through the kitchen the way they'd come, but Kevin, nervous and shaking, knocked over a stack of pans. The clatter was deafening in the silence. What was that? check it out. Go, go, go. Marcus hissed, and the group abandoned stealth for speed, rushing back through the restaurant's dining area. Behind them, they could hear the men shouting, boots pounding on tile. They burst out the front entrance onto the main street, and Marcus's worst fears were realized. Biters. Dozens of them, turning at the sound of their arrival, dead eyes focusing with terrifying purpose. The group skidded to a halt, trapped between the dead ahead and whoever was chasing them from behind. Left. That office building. Grace shouted, pointing to a glass-fronted building with a revolving door that was partially open. They ran, Beth crying out in pain but keeping pace with Riley's help. The biters lurched toward them, arms outstretched, mouths open in silent hunger. Marcus could smell them now, that awful rotting meat smell that invaded your nose and seemed to stick to everything. Darius reached the door first, shoving it open wider and holding it as everyone rushed through. A biter in a tattered business suit lunged at Kevin, and the kids screamed, but Grace was there, her hammer coming down hard on the thing's skull with a wet crunch. Jake grabbed Kevin and yanked him through the doorway. Marcus! Jake shouted. Marcus was the last one in, backing through the door as three biters reached for him. He swung his bat, connecting with the first one's jaw and sending it sprawling. Darius grabbed a piece of debris and jammed it through the door's mechanism, wedging it shut just as multiple bodies slammed against the glass. The group stood in the lobby of the office building, breathing hard, their hearts pounding. The glass was holding, but more biters were gathering outside, drawn by the commotion. Through the crowd of undead, Marcus could see two men emerge from the restaurant, looking frustrated. One of them was talking into a radio. "We gotta move," Marcus said between breaths. "They're coordinating. This whole thing was a trap to capture survivors." "Haven's not real?" Kevin asked, his voice breaking. "Oh, it might be real," Riley said, her expression hard. "But I don't think it's the sanctuary they advertised. I think it's something a whole lot worse." "Slave labor," Grace said grimly. "Or worse. There's always someone ready to take advantage of desperate people." The building shuddered slightly, and they all looked up. The biters outside were pressing against the glass, more and more of them gathering. The structural integrity wouldn't hold forever. "Stairs," Darius said, already moving. "We go up, find another way out. Maybe a sky bridge to another building." They climbed, floor after floor, the sound of breaking glass echoing from below as the lobby finally gave way. They could hear the biters flooding in, that awful shuffling sound multiplied by dozens. By the time they reached the 10th floor, Beth couldn't go any further. She collapsed against a wall, her leg bleeding through the bandage. "Leave me," she gasped. "I'm done. I can't keep going." "Not happening," Marcus said firmly. "Darius, you carry her. We find a defensible position, we hole up, and we figure this out." "There." Riley pointed down a hallway. "Corner office. We can see out, assess the situation." They barricaded themselves in what used to be some executive's fancy workspace, complete with a big desk, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows that gave them a view of the nightmare outside. Biters filled the streets now, hundreds of them, drawn by all the noise and chaos. And somewhere out there, whoever had set the trap was still hunting them. Marcus stood at the window, looking out at the dead city, at the setting sun painting everything in blood-red light again. They were trapped, running low on everything that mattered, and the one hope they'd had turned out to be a trap. But they were still breathing. Still together. And as long as that was true, there was still a chance. "All right," he said, turning to face his group, his family in this messed-up new world. "We rest for 1 hour. Then we plan. There's gotta be a way out of this. There's always a way out." Jake managed a tired grin. "That's the spirit, man. We've been in bad spots before." "Not this bad," Kevin muttered. "Then I guess we're due for a miracle," Grace said, checking her hammer. "Or we make our own. That's kind of our thing now." Outside, the dead continued to gather, and somewhere in the city, people with bad intentions were hunting them. But inside that office, 7 people refused to give up. Because that's what survivors did. They adapted. They endured. And they kept fighting, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, one breath at a time. The world had ended, but their story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The hour of rest felt more like 5 minutes, and Marcus knew nobody had actually slept. How could they? 10 floors below, the biters were shuffling through the building, bumping into walls, knocking over furniture, making those god-awful noises that would haunt Marcus's nightmares for the rest of his life, however long that turned out to be. Riley had the radio equipment spread out on the fancy executive desk, her fingers working carefully with the wires and dials, headphones pressed against one ear while she listened to the static and occasional bursts of speech that crackled through. "Anything useful?" Marcus asked, moving to stand beside her. Riley's expression was tight, focused. "Yeah, and none of it's good. The guys who tried to trap us, they're part of something bigger. Call themselves the Collectors. From what I'm picking up, they've been using the Haven broadcasts to lure in survivors, then they either put them to work or trade them off to other groups for supplies." "Trade them?" Grace's voice was sharp with disgust. "Like slaves?" "Worse than that probably," Jake said darkly. "People get real twisted when society collapses. All those rules we lived by, all that civilization, it was just a thin layer over something uglier. When that layer gets stripped away, you see what folks are really made of." Darius was at the window, his large frame silhouetted against the fading daylight. "We got more problems. Look." Marcus joined him and cursed under his breath. Down on the street, 3 trucks had pulled up, military-style vehicles that looked like they'd been reinforced with metal plating and barbed wire. Men were getting out, maybe a dozen of them, all armed with actual guns, not just the makeshift weapons Marcus's group was carrying. They were organized too, moving in formation, setting up some kind of perimeter. "They're serious about catching us," Marcus muttered. "Question is why," Beth said from where she lay on the leather couch, her voice weak but her mind still sharp. "They don't know us. Why commit this many resources to capturing 7 random people?" "Because we made it this far," Riley said, looking up from the radio. "Think about it. We survived 3 weeks in the city. We're capable, strong, smart enough to avoid the biters and find supplies. In this new world, that makes us valuable. They probably grab everyone they can, see who's useful and who's not. And the ones who aren't useful?" Kevin asked, though his expression said he already knew the answer. Nobody responded, but they didn't have to. They'd all seen enough in the past 3 weeks to understand exactly what happened to people who weren't deemed useful anymore. Marcus moved back to the desk, spreading out the city map they'd been using. His finger traced their current location, then the surrounding blocks. "Okay, here's what we know. We can't go down, not with those biters flooding the lower floors. We can't stay here because eventually those collector guys are gonna come up looking for us. So we go across." "Across where?" Jake asked, leaning over the map. Marcus pointed to the adjacent building, another office tower that stood maybe 15 feet away from their current position. "There. We break through the window, rig some kind of bridge, get everyone across, then cut it behind us. They'll have to search this whole building before they realize we're gone. Buys us time. That's a 15-foot gap, 10 stories up," Grace said slowly. "One slip and it's over." "You got a better idea. I'm all ears," Marcus shot back, not unkindly. He knew it was crazy, but crazy was all they had left. Darius was already moving, checking the office furniture. Conference table. Solid wood, maybe 12 feet long. "We could use it as a bridge if we can get it through the window." "Won't reach all the way," Jake pointed out. "Doesn't have to. We break the windows on both sides, angle the table from here to there, use it to get most of the way across. Last few feet, you jump." The room went quiet. Everyone was doing the math, calculating the risk, weighing certain death from the collectors against possible death from falling 10 stories. When you put it like that, the choice was obvious, but it didn't make it any easier. I can't make that, Beth said simply. I can barely walk. You guys go. Leave me something to make it quick when the time comes. Beth, I swear, Marcus started, but she cut him off. I'm not being noble, and I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. I'll slow you down, and you'll all die trying to save me. That's not how this should end. Her eyes were clear despite the fever, determined despite the pain. Riley knelt beside the couch, taking Beth's hand. What if we lower you down instead? With rope, out the window on the other side, away from where those collector guys are positioned? 10 stories of rope? Jake shook his head. We don't have that much, and even if we did, she's in no condition to rappel. Then we go down a few floors first, Riley persisted. The biters are mainly in the lobby and lower levels, right? We get to maybe the 3rd or 4th floor on the other building, then we lower her down from there. It's less distance, and we're away from both the collectors and the main horde. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt much lately. Hope. It was a long shot, hell, it was barely even a short shot, but it was something. Could work. We'd need to move fast, and we'd need to get lucky, but we've been lucky before. Luck runs out, Kevin said quietly, but he was already moving to help Darius with the conference table. They worked quickly, knowing every minute wasted was a minute closer to being found. The conference table was heavy, solid oak that probably cost more than Marcus used to make in 6 months, but it was strong, and that's what mattered now. They flipped it on its side and positioned it near the floor-to-ceiling window. Darius used his crowbar to smash through the glass, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet office. There goes the neighborhood, Jake muttered as the biters below responded to the noise, their moans intensifying. Marcus moved to the window, looking down. The biters were gathering directly below, drawn by the sound of breaking glass. But the collectors were on the move too, several of them heading toward the building's entrance. They had maybe 10 minutes before armed men started sweeping the floors. Other building, same floor, Darius said, already swinging his crowbar at the window of the adjacent tower. More glass shattered, and now they had 2 openings facing each other across 15 feet of empty air and a 10-story drop. They maneuvered the table through the window, the wind at this height stronger than Marcus expected, tugging at their clothes and hair. Carefully, with Darius's strength doing most of the work, they angled the table out and across. It reached, just barely, resting on the windowsill of the other building with maybe a foot to spare on each end. That's the most terrifying bridge I've ever seen, Grace said, and she wasn't wrong. The conference table spanned the gap, but it was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide, and it wobbled when Darius tested it with his hand. One wrong step, one gust of strong wind, and whoever was on it would fall to their death. I'll go first, Darius said. I'm the heaviest. If it holds me, it'll hold anyone. If it doesn't hold you, we lose our strongest fighter, Marcus countered. I'll go. I'm lighter, and if something goes wrong, you guys need Darius more than you need me. Before anyone could argue, Marcus climbed onto the windowsill. The wind hit him immediately, colder up here, tugging at his jacket. He didn't look down. Looking down was a one-way ticket to freezing up, and they didn't have time for that. He stepped onto the table, feeling it shift slightly under his weight. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, drowning out even the moans of the biters below. 1 step. 2 steps. The table wobbled, and Marcus's arms shot out for balance. 3 steps. 4. He was halfway across now, the wind pushing at him like it wanted to see if he could fly. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. 5 steps. 6. He could reach the other window now. 7 steps, and he was climbing through the opening into the other building, his legs shaking so bad he nearly collapsed. Clear, he called back, his voice rough. Come on. Jake came next, moving faster than Marcus had, his natural athleticism making it look almost easy. Then Riley, who didn't look down once, her eyes fixed on Marcus the whole time. Grace followed, gripping the edges of the table so hard her knuckles went white, but she made it. Kevin looked like he might pass out from fear, but he went anyway, motivated more by what was behind him than what was ahead. That left Darius and Beth. They could hear footsteps now, boots on stairs, voices calling out. The collectors were in the building, working their way up floor by floor. Darius picked up Beth like she weighed nothing, cradling her in his arms. "Hold on tight," he told her. "Don't look down, don't let go, and trust me." "That's a lot to ask," Beth managed a weak joke, but she wrapped her arms around Darius's neck. Watching Darius cross was the longest minute of Marcus's life. The big man moved carefully, his weight making the table sag and creak with every step. Beth had her face buried in his shoulder, and Marcus could see her lips moving, maybe praying, maybe just counting. The table shifted, tilting slightly, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. But Darius adjusted, redistributing his weight, and kept moving. 3 more steps. 2 more. Then Jake and Marcus were reaching out, grabbing Darius's arm, pulling them both through the window to safety. "The table," Riley said urgently. "We need to pull it across so they can't follow." They hauled the conference table into their new building, leaving a 15-foot gap between the 2 towers that nobody was jumping across without a running start and a death wish. Across the gap, they could see flashlight beams sweeping through the office they'd just left. "Move, down the stairs, now," Marcus ordered, and the group headed for the stairwell, moving as quietly as they could. They passed the 9th floor, the 8th, the 7th. At the 6th floor, they heard it, biters in the stairwell below them, that distinctive shuffling sound. 6th floor, out, find another way down, Marcus directed, and they pushed through the door into another office space, this one more modern, with open floor plans and cubicles. The sun had set completely now, and the office was dark except for the ambient light from the city outside, that strange orange glow from fires that still burned in various districts. They found a utility closet with maintenance access to the building's elevator shaft. It wasn't ideal, but the emergency ladder inside the shaft would take them down while avoiding both the biters in the stairwell and the collectors searching the other building. "You gotta be kidding me," Kevin muttered, looking down the dark shaft where the ladder descended into blackness. "Always an adventure with us," Jake said, trying for levity that nobody felt. They descended one by one, the metal ladder cold and slightly slick under their hands. Marcus went first again with a flashlight clenched between his teeth, the beam cutting through the darkness but somehow making it feel even more oppressive. The shaft smelled like oil and dust and something else, something organic that Marcus tried not to think about too hard. They made it down to the 4th floor, then the 3rd. Marcus was aiming for the 2nd floor, hoping it was high enough to avoid the main concentration of biters but low enough that they could lower Beth down with the rope they'd salvaged weeks ago from a camping store. But when they reached the 3rd floor access door, they heard something that made everyone freeze. Screaming. Human screaming. Marcus held up a fist, and everyone stopped on the ladder. The screaming was coming from somewhere close, maybe on this floor, maybe one below. It was a woman's voice, raw with terror, punctuated by the sound of fists pounding on something hollow, like a door. "We can't," Grace whispered, reading Marcus's expression. "We barely got out of the last mess. We can't go looking for more trouble." But the screaming continued, desperate, terrified, and Marcus thought about his sister, about how she'd probably screamed like that when the biters got her, about how nobody had come to help. 5 minutes, he said firmly. "We check it out, see if we can help, and if it's too hot, we bail." 5 minutes. He could see the conflict on everyone's faces, the desire to help warring with the instinct to survive. Finally, Darius nodded. Then Jake. Then the others, one by one. They exited the elevator shaft on the 3rd floor, weapons ready. The screaming was louder now, coming from down a hallway to their left. Marcus led the way, his bat raised, every sense on high alert. The hallway was dark, lit only by emergency exit signs that were still somehow working on battery backup. The screaming was coming from behind a door labeled server room. Someone was inside, pounding on the reinforced door, and from the sound of it, there were biters on the other side trying to get in. But that didn't make sense. If the person was inside and the biters were outside, why were they screaming? Unless. Biters inside, person outside, Riley said, reaching the same conclusion. They're trapped in the hallway, can't get away. They rounded the corner and found her, a young woman, maybe mid-20s, her clothes torn and bloody, backed against the server room door while 3 biters advanced on her from the other end of the hallway. She had a knife, but her hand was shaking so bad she'd never land a killing blow. "Hey! Ugly!" Darius shouted, and the biters turned toward the new noise. That was the thing about the dead, they were easily distracted. The fight was quick and brutal. Darius took the first biter with his crowbar, the impact echoing in the narrow hallway. Marcus got the second one, his back crushing its skull with a sickening crunch that he'd never get used to. Jake handled the third one, his pipe wrench doing its grim work efficiently. The woman collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief and terror. Thank you, oh my God, thank you." "You hurt? You bit?" Marcus asked, the questions automatic. "You always checked?" "Always." She shook her head frantically. No, just scratches. I got away but they chased me, I got turned around in the building, I couldn't find a way out." "You alone?" Grace asked, already checking the woman over for injuries with a professional eye. "There were others. We were together. But the collectors, they took most of us. I escaped during a transfer, but I've been running for hours." Marcus and Jake exchanged looks. The collectors again. "Where were they taking you?" "North, toward the old industrial district. They have a compound there, big walls, guards, the whole setup. They've been gathering survivors for weeks. Said we'd work for them or we'd feed the biters." Her eyes were haunted, and Marcus knew that look. It was the look of someone who'd seen things that couldn't be unseen. "What's your name?" Riley asked gently. "Tiffany. Tiffany Brooks." "Okay, Tiffany, I'm Riley. This is Marcus, Jake, Darius, Grace, Kevin, and Beth. We're heading south, trying to find a way out of the city. You're welcome to come with us, but you gotta keep up and stay quiet. Can you do that?" Tiffany nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you." They made their way back to the elevator shaft, now 8 instead of 7, and continued down to the second floor. From there, they found a window facing the back alley, away from where the collectors were searching. The alley was relatively clear, only a handful of biters wandering aimlessly. "We can take them," Darius said, and he was right. They lowered Beth down first, using rope tied to a radiator, with Darius controlling the descent. Then they climbed down a maintenance ladder attached to the building's exterior, dropping the last 6 feet to the alley below. The handful of biters turned toward them, and the group made quick work of them, 7 people with weapons against 4 slow-moving dead ones. It wasn't even close. They moved through the alleys heading south, away from the collectors, away from the false promise of haven, away from the death trap that downtown Chicago had become. The night was cold, and they were exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and stubborn refusal to die. But they were moving, and they were together. Marcus didn't know where they were going. The suburbs maybe, or further out, to the farmlands where the population had been lower and maybe the biter concentration was thinner. All he knew was that they'd survived another day, saved another person, and kept fighting. As they moved through the darkness, Riley fell into step beside him. "You think we'll ever find somewhere safe? A real haven, not some trap?" Marcus looked back at their group, wounded Beth being supported by strong Darius, young Kevin walking a little taller after surviving the bridge crossing, Grace keeping watch with the vigilance of someone who'd found a new purpose, Jake covering their 6 like always, and now Tiffany, a stranger they'd saved because that's what decent people did, even at the end of the world. "Maybe we don't find it," Marcus said slowly. "Maybe we make it. Find somewhere defensible, gather more survivors like us, good people who haven't lost their humanity. Build something real, something that lasts." "That's a hell of a dream," Riley said, but she was smiling. "Yeah, well, we live in a hell of a world now. Might as well dream big." They walked on through the dead city, 7 became 8, and maybe 8 would become more. The world had ended, but people endured. They adapted, they survived, and sometimes, if they were lucky and smart and refused to give up, they even found hope in the darkness. The biters could have the cities, the collectors could have their twisted compounds, but they couldn't have the human spirit. That was still alive, still fighting, still believing that tomorrow might be better than today. Marcus Webb didn't know what the future held. Nobody did anymore. But he knew that as long as he was breathing, he'd keep fighting for it. For his group, for the strangers they'd save along the way, for the possibility that somewhere out there, humanity was building something new from the ashes of what had been lost. The epic journey wasn't over. In a lot of ways, it was just beginning. And Marcus was ready for whatever came next. They all were. Because that's what survivors did. They survived, one day at a time, one step at a time, together. Always together. The night swallowed them as they disappeared into the urban maze, ghosts moving through a dead world, carrying with them the last thing the apocalypse couldn't kill, hope.